This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the Chief of Naval Operations makes his fighting instructions to the fleet. Admiral Darryl Caudle is here. The real bottleneck for software deployment as agencies seek fielded, useful systems. And solving the Navy's hardest problems for unmanned. Interoperability could be the key to successful joint operations. Welcome to FedGov Today in Washington, D.C., on YouTube and around the world on the American Forces Network. I'm George Jackson. Francis is off today. The Navy's new fighting instructions detail how the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Darryl Caudle, expects his service to fight and win wars. He released them this week at West 2026 in San Diego and joined us for this exclusive conversation.
Admiral, great to see you again. Thank you for joining me. I'm fascinated, as I mentioned before we turn the cameras on, about the semantics here. This is not a fighting strategy. This is not a fighting concept. These are fighting instructions. Yes, why'd you use that term, sir?
I thought it was appropriate that to talk to my fleet and the folks that are conducting naval warfare, they give very clear-eyed understanding of where I think we need to go as a Navy to handle the threats of the future with the resources that we're given, and to optimize how we actually lay down that Navy in a way to make it most effectively used. And with the idea, and which is key to the document, without ever losing sight of our differentiated value to the joint force and to the nation.
Throughout the 30-some pages of this, almost 40, you mentioned that idea of resources a number of times. You're very careful, I notice, you and your team, to couple what's possible, what's reasonable to think resource-wise, to the capability that you need to deliver to the warfighter.
That's exactly right. When I look at the national security strategy and the national defense strategy in total, it becomes very obvious that to do what it was required in those strategy, Francis, is to have a Navy that is extremely flexible. I've got to be able to mass my combat power where I need to against peer adversaries, but I've got to cover down in a simultaneous way a lot of things all over the globe. And with a Navy that's not big enough to do all that in the common way I would like to do that, with strike groups perhaps, or a lot of submarines, then I've got to have ways to tailor that force applicable to the threat environment.
You have 4 campaign areas, and I read, single accountable officials are directed to take their own action to meet the intent of these fighting instructions in each of those areas. First one of those is battle-ready soldiers. The CNP obviously will take the point on that. On each of these, I'll ask you, if you would, to just give me a thumbnail of what your instructions are in that area.
Well, you know, for battle-ready sailors is to making sure that a sailor is ready for combat. I do that by improving their mastery over what they need to know. That's how I train them. That's how I do continuous education with them. That's how I give them the tools to be effective on the deck plate. It's also much more than that. For them to truly be ready, I have to give them quality of service, and I got to take care of their families. And when I put all that together, then I get somebody who's ready to go into harm's way.
When you and I spoke at the Pentagon the last time, you talked about the fact that you were, that was the first thing you got after when you became CNO, and for that reason, was what are the conditions under which the sailors that I have can work?
Yes.
What have you seen in the time that you spent going out to see where those sailors live and how they live that informs the way that you're going to have CMP get after this?
Well, first I would tell you we're just enjoying record recruiting and record retention, bringing in about 10,000 more than our losses for 2 consecutive years. So that's not by happenstance. That's tremendous work by our recruiting force. And our retention has also been at an all-time high. That's because of the mission. And so when I go out to around the world, and I've been traveling quite a bit, what I get the feedback on are the things I need to work on. It's not all, roses, but what they're telling me is they are extremely proud of the missions they're involved in, and they love serving, and they want to actually, contribute in a meaningful way. So the feedback I'm getting is how I can best help them do that.
The second campaign area is battle-ready force. The SAO for that one is the Deputy CNO for Installations and Logistics. What's involved there, sir?
Well, I think it's two things. A battle-ready force, one, has to be grounded in what I call the foundry, in my foundry fleet and fight. So you can't have a battle-ready force without a world-class foundry. This is the maintenance facilities. These are the hangars. These are the piers. These are the installation and infrastructure from schoolhouses to galleys that we actually launch our Navy from to be world-class. This also ties to my ability to have combat surge-ready units to flow out of cycle if we have to go fight, and then to ensure that the deployed forces are being maintained while they're forward deployed, and the ones that are in the depot are getting out on time.
I'll ask you this question about a number of these. What's the delta, in your view right now, between where you are and where you want to be?
Well, I think the delta is, if I take combat surge ready, we have a target of 80%. On average, I'm probably about 10% below my target. So I'm about at 70% there. So we got work to do to get on target. Gaps at sea, I can talk about that. I've chipped away at over 3,000 of those just in my time as CNO already. And I've got a ways to go there, about 15,000 additional gaps at sea across our Navy. So, but we're making headway.
The third item is Battle Force for today and tomorrow. The Deputy CNO for Integration and Capabilities and Resources has that one. What will you expect to see there?
Well, this is about our force design. This is about how I envision the Navy of the future to actually ensure that we're not only fielding a ready force today, but we're looking very wide-eyed at the threats of tomorrow with the capability and the curves of those technological improvements that our adversaries are enjoying, the lower cost of entry to actually have very effective asymmetric capabilities, and that I am fielding a Navy that can be afforded, but can be sustained, can be manned, organized, and equipped effectively going forward to actually meet those demands globally. So that is probably, of all the things I spend my time on day to day, is in that third line of effort.
You also, though, have a number of guiding instruments already in this. I read guided by the Hedge strategy, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, Navy warfighting concept, Navy deterrence concept, and Force Design 2045. That one piqued my interest. Is that something that I have not, that I'm not familiar with yet?
You're not familiar with it. It hasn't been released yet, and so it's something we're working on. And so that gets after what is that Navy that has that type of outlook. All this is with Secretary Phelan is about shipbuilding, shipbuilding, shipbuilding. And the president's made that perfectly clear that we want a renaissance of shipbuilding. And that takes a lot of different shipyards to be involved with this. Foreign partners have got to be part of this, and certainly a workforce that can actually deliver it.
I will look forward to discussing that with you or a designee when there's more to learn about Force Design 2045. The fourth in your campaign plan is Global Battle Integration. Deputy CNO for Operations Plan, Strategy, and Warfighting Development has that one. What's encompassed there, sir?
There is an acknowledgement that the U.S. Navy cannot fight alone. We have to be globally integrated. We have to be integrated with our joint force partners. We have to be integrated with allies and partners. And we have to be integrated with stakeholders. That's Congress. Okay, that's the Office of Secretary of the War, and maybe perhaps most important, the American people have got to understand what our Navy, its differentiated value, what is it I bring to national prosperity, and so that integration is extremely important because we don't fight alone.
I mentioned the Hedge strategy, and you write in that part of the fighting instructions, much of the job of the CNO is to continue defining, resourcing, and building these forces in service of the Navy's enduring global missions. 5 pieces to the Hedge strategy, 5 core attributes is what you call them. How did you determine those 5, and how do they contribute to what you want to get out of the force?
Well, I think for your listeners, the core to hedging, if you will, is that a one-size-fits-all Navy is not a good approach. That's why the battleship and the Golden Fleet Initiative is so important with the frigate on the other end to give me this high-low mix. We already have our aircraft carrier as a capital ship, great submarine force, and Arleigh Burkes. But to increase the degrees of freedom that I can package tailored forces in a way that I can deliver that for combatant commanders to solve the problems they need without giving them an all or nothing approach. I don't want them to have nothing and then wait on the carrier strike group to show up. I can do better than that. What's going to enable that, and perhaps put that on steroids a bit, is what I call the tailored offsets in the document. And that's how I utilize smart investments through our unmanned capabilities, robotic and autonomous systems, in a carefully crafted way that solve my key operational problems around the globe. So when you tailor my existing general purpose forces with these tailored offsets, then I can make my Navy punch bigger than its current weight class would indicate.
You can find a link to the new fighting instructions and read more about them on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com.